Years ago, when I was a much smaller human, but still a pretty giant nerd, I spent many evenings at my desk creating miniature armies with which to do battle. Nicely, I could do that both physically while collecting Warhammer and virtually when playing the Total War games. But this year, those two worlds came crashing together in Total War Warhammer. And when Creative Assembly, the developers behind the Total War franchise, asked me if I wanted to go behind the scenes to see exactly what goes into making a monster, I jumped at the chance. With the Wood Elves joining the ranks of Total War, CA sent us over our very own tree man, which I spent the best part of 2 days building and painting for our studio visit. Once done, I jumped on a train and headed down to Creative Assembly's Horsham-based studio in the southeast of England to see what goes into the making of our monster. So, over the next 15 minutes, I'll be going behind the scenes to visit the talented designers creating the concept art, chatting to modelers and animators, and even checking out how exactly you motion capture a giant tree person. From tabletop to gameplay, this is the making of a monster. So we're starting the day talking to Rich, and I understand you're in charge of all the new cool content that gets added into the game after release. So we brought in our tree man. So once you've decided what race and what you're gonna add into the game, what's the first step? You assemble a team, be like, right, it's tree man time.
So we look through the army books, we see especially what's been in the 8th edition, and then we pick our lords and we pick our heroes. So like I said, we make sure that we go for something that's different from one to another.
So after you've decided what you're gonna put into the game, your relationship with Games Workshop, how much wiggle room do they give you? Because obviously you've got the model, but that's very different to what ends up in the game. What's the grey area between those two things?
Well, that's the nice thing. That grey area really allows us to expand out, our ideas, to bring those things to life, to make them really cool and exciting. So if you take the tree men and their strangle roots, for example, which are the kind of the whipping, lashing out attacks, there's a small passage written in the book about that, but it doesn't really go into too much detail other than, it will say it's a strength this and attack value that. So we get to play around with those ideas, whether you want to make it like an indie style, ball whip and lashing out, or something like ripping under the ground and encasing somebody. So that's that grey area again, where we're getting to play around with it and bring these guys to life in a vibrant and exciting way.
That grey area is where the many artists, designers and developers really get to bring our little model to life. But one of the first people who get their hands on our tree man is concept artist Theo. So we're in the concept art department now talking to Theo. Where do you start? What's your inspiration for getting this on the page? Do you have access to the models? Do you use the lore?
So yeah, straight away we go to the miniatures, look at the lore, what the story is. There's so much artwork that's built up through the history of Games Workshop, and then extrapolate what's really good for our game, because our game's obviously an RTS, it's top down, so it has got specific looks that it needs to adhere to and work with.
What were the biggest challenges when it came to Elves and Treeman?
Inherently is the fact that they are quite complex and tree-like. Yeah. We've got to really make them feel alive and a bit more...
Where would a tree have a joint? Where would a face
Exactly, yeah. Well, obviously all its special abilities and trying to bring them forth within its design as well. How can it adhere to that within game design?
When they're all complete, where do they go then? You've got it all down the page. What's the next step?
Next stage is sending it off to the modelers.
This is Johan Tran, character artist and modeler extraordinaire, who turns Theo's concept art into the textures and models that give our monster some life. So how closely do you stick to the concept art? What kind of inspiration do you draw from to actually bring the detail and the character to life?
So obviously Theo put in a lot of detail into his concept, as well as like Games Workshop, like these sculpts themselves. I think, especially the tree man sculpt for the Wood Elves, is probably one of the better ones, I think, for the Wood Elves. And yeah, it's already got tons of personality. They've done a really good job of just making it giving essentially a walking tree, a lot of personality and giving a bit of an alien feel to it, which is really cool.
And how much do your own personal kind of tastes and twists do you get to add into this model?
Oh, definitely. We try to sneak in a few things here and there. We're all massive nerds here, right? Marvel, anime, all that stuff. We kind of, subtle hints here and there, a little bit of mechas. There's a certain mechas and Gundams and Gurren Lagann, sort of with the stomach, the stomach face. yeah, sort of. It's subtle. It's
So I need
subtle.
to start looking for faces in the stomach of tree men now. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, pretty much. It's just once you see, you can't unsee it, kind of thing. So.
What do you prefer? Do you prefer making like humans, or is monsters something you can really get creative with?
I think for me personally, it's like monsters for sure. Like
Yeah.
it's pretty much, just sort of satisfies my 10-year-old self. It's just like creating making basically the fiercest, angriest, meanest characters you can sort of put on the field. Like that's kind of what I really enjoy. Like I mean, everyone else here does. Like we all got our specialties, and but I just love like the uglier the better. The uglier, the meaner, the better.
Once the model is suitably ugly, the creation is given a skeleton and a simplified version of that is sent over to the motion capture team. A process that I didn't expect took place in an old warehouse on an industrial estate around the outskirts of Horsham. But it's here, in this shabby, oversized shed, that the magic of mocap happens. So we're here with Pete Clapperton, motion capture manager. Yep. Show us around. This is your playhouse, your studio. What can you tell me about it?
This is an 11 metre by 10 metre volume, which is quite sizable for a mocap studio, especially an internal one in the game studio. We have a 48 camera Vicon system set up, optical system. Basically, you get someone in a suit, you put 53 markers on them, which is our default setup. And they're all reflective for the infrared light that you can see around you here. And that basically picks up all the markers and it identifies where they are within the volume. Right. And we attach a skeleton to those little points, and then you get your character movement, and you can attach that to whatever character you want to.
I can see you've got some peculiar props over here as part of your creative process. What is this for? You've got a head and a stick, a trampoline, and what's that, like a gymnastic horse?
It is a gymnastic horse, but really to us it's a real horse. It even has an H on one side and an A on the other for the head and the other end.
Oh wow.
And yeah, trampolines and for jumping about. We do a lot of deaths, like explosive deaths and that sort of thing. You bounce on there and off you go.
So if you see someone in the game getting hit by a cannonball, that's someone who's been in the studio jumping off a trampoline and falling to a mat. Yeah. I'm never going to look at the game in the same way again. No. I'm guessing for Total War Warhammer it's been a bit different for you guys, because if you mentioned before you worked on Shogun. Yeah. As far as I know, they're all humans in Shogun, but now we're talking about monsters. Yeah. How would you go about doing motion capture for something that, isn't a human? Could be a goblin or a big tree man. How do you capture that?
It's an awful lot of it is to do with performance. You've got to have it in your mind what you're doing, because a lot of stuff that's bipedal, 2 legs, is generally it's just a human character. But they're creatures and they don't move like humans, so you have to get people to perform in the right way. That's actually one of the reasons why we get the animators to do a lot of the stuff themselves, because they have in their mind what they want it to look like. So they're very good at reproducing that in their own way.
I got one more question for you. Can I have a go?
Of course you can.
After an hour or so of being covered in balls and working up a sweat pretending to be a giant living tree, the next step saw us head back into the warmth of the main studio again to hand over to an animator who ensures that the performance is just the right kind of wooden. Now we've been to the motion capture studio. Where does the motion capture come in for your role?
So we normally go to the mocap studio to first of all just throw some ideas. By the end of the day we'll have mocap data and we can literally put that in the game the following day, and we can just see where the things are working. So the case for the tree men, because of its nature, because it's really, it's a tree, it's not a kind of a living kind of character or something like that, it's literally a spirit that's kind of controlling the actual tree. So a lot of the movement that we was getting in the motion capture wasn't working quite straight away off the bat. For things like monsters, like the tree man, how do you kind of animate a sense of presence, its size, its stature, its mass? What do you need to do to, so obviously you know how human moves, but is this a kind of guesswork? You just use your imagination? No, we always kind of use reference. So there's great reference films. Go through like Lord of the Rings, so they got the kind of the tree characters in there as well. So we use those kind of references, anything from YouTube, kind of act ourselves, and also kind of imagination, how we think that looks believable. the key thing, if we believe it works that way, then we'll kind of, we think we're kind of sold on that idea.
Finally, how many animations does this guy actually have?
I would say probably about 70 odds.
70. That's a lot of man hours to animate
exactly.
roots and trees.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got all the roots, there's so many different joints. One of the things we want to do when he punches in the ground, that the roots will come from the ground there, so really make an essence, you know, when we're kind of animating all these different creatures, we really want to get those kind of personality. They look different from other characters. What we don't want is this giant to be like, oh, it's like another kind of big creature. We really want to give it that kind of personality and kind of identify, oh, that's unique.
While a sense of presence and personality has been key in creating our monster, the point is mute if our creation doesn't have the right sound to match its stature. So for the final step in the process, I spoke to senior sound designer Byron Bullock about what a tree man sounds like. So now you've got everything from all the other teams. What's your first step? How do you start the sound?
Creating the sound for the tree men in the game is quite a big process for the audio team. There's quite a lot of people involved, and kind of I'll work as a sound designer with the dialogue guys to create a kind of process, I suppose, for the sound. So we want it to sound wooden and kind of hollow and extremely large. Also its vocalizations, like its screams, its attacks, its footsteps when it falls, all those kind of sounds that make up the rest of its
Give it some life.
life, I suppose.
Right, so what goes into the Foley then? Obviously you mentioned there's quite a lot of parts of that, the movement, the attacks,
Yeah.
the animations. What goes into making the monster sound like a monster?
Well, with the tree men, we actually had to go out and record real tree felling sounds.
Okay.
So we went out as a team, I think there was about 4 of us that went out with a professional. We didn't actually chop the trees down, but we went and recorded the sound of large oak trees falling and cracking, and so you can imagine the sound of an oak tree kind of falling,
Yeah.
that kind of and that kind of sound. And those sounds make up the actual vocalizations and also the movement of the tree man.
Apparently you have an interesting tree man story when it comes to recording some of the audio.
Well, it's a strange one because there's lots and lots of sounds that make up the tree man. So there's the actual real sounds of trees falling,
Yeah.
but there's also sounds of elephants pitched down and reversed. There's my voice making weird vocal sounds. As sound designers, you have to be able to make strange noises. So yeah, we made just lots of weird noises, and then it all comes together in the editing to create something that you kind of think should sound like that. Hopefully, we fool people.
Having met many of the teams involved in creating something like this, I really got a sense of the passion these guys feel for their creations, and just how much they love doing it. These are teams that gel together coherently and have done so for the best part of 20 years. As both a Warhammer fan and a Total War fan, it's been absolutely fascinating to come behind the scenes today and see what exactly goes into making these tiny miniatures into the giant monsters we see on screen. If you've enjoyed this behind the scenes look, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to GameSpot, and we'll see you next time.